The school year is near, and QPL is here to help you and your family get ready. Come to any library location from August 23rd through August 29th for a physical copy of our Back to School Guide, fun giveaways, and much more. For more details, visit queenslibrary.org. Summer is a time to read and explore. We invite you to discover our programs and activities for children, teens, and adults, enjoy our curated book lists for every reading level, and so much more. Join us this summer at the library and let us know, what's your story? For more information, visit summerreading.queenslibrary.org. Queens Public Library, in partnership with New York City Public Schools, is offering free lunches for kids and teens all summer long at 48 library locations across Queens. Summer meals will be provided Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. through Friday, September 4th. Enrollment is not required and there is no cost. Just stop by. For more information about free summer meals and a list of participating libraries, visit queenslibrary.org.
So it's like that awful stillness before the storm. You feel so much, you can't let any of it out. Mm-hmm. It's also the disbelief when he says, how now, what news? What? Yeah. News? Yeah. Anything new in the dining room? Anything new happening? And your fear that you've married a loser. They always said he was a loser, your parents did.
No. Are you stupid?
Text.
We have scorched the snake, not killed it. Full of scorpions. It's my mind, dear wife.
Sorry, sweetheart, but your scorpions are your problem.
Make us mad.
I thought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep.
My husband.
Sleep?
I have done the deed.
The innocent sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care.
You cried, sleep no more.
Because they want to be kids so much, you know. The eye of childhood that fears the painted devil. What does she know about that so much?
And therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more.
Hello, I'm Taylor Brady, and welcome back to Culture Connection. This is, as always, curated by Daniel Zaleski, but now it's in its 14th year at the Queens Public Library, where we are proud to present international artists from emerging talents to award-winning masters in film, literature, music, theater. And today we're kind of combining three of them. We have a film about theater artists, to some degree, based on one of their books. And now that we're in a virtual format, we have people joining in from all over the world. Today, we have people joining us from England and Ireland. So, hello. We have the director of acting, Sophie Faines, and the co-founders of Cheek by Jowl Theater Company, Declan and Nick here. Hey, guys. So the first thing I wanted to jump into was just how the three of you found each other. This feels like an ongoing collaboration, but was it?
Well, I can answer that because
yes.
I was going to say that I first came across Declan and Nick because my brother Rafe was cast to play Romeo, one of the first professional jobs that he had. So that was when I first saw their work. And then when I was, as a filmmaker, you're fascinated by the work with actors. And I'm essentially, my films have been documentary, but I did work with a filmmaker, Peter Greenaway, who was terrified of actors, and even though he worked with amazing actors. And when I saw the productions of Cheek by Jowl, and when I read, of course, The Actor and the Target, I was so thrilled that I had a kind of access to asking to be invited in to see Declan and Nick working and to see this rehearsal process, which very kindly you let me watch about 20 years ago. And it was as riveting as the book and the productions. And so I've wanted to make this film for 20 years. And fortunately, because of the pandemic, it was possible. And that's to document their method of working with actors. And I think the film shows how extraordinary and fascinating and what the possibilities are to kind of learn and glean and see that process. For anyone in any creative practice, or even people who aren't working necessarily in making theatre, it's because it's really about human relationship.
How did COVID help this? You said that the pandemic helped bring this about.
Well, I mean, Nick, you can explain that.
Well, during COVID, we weren't able to function normally as a theatre company. But we had funds from the Arts Council, from the government, and that did enable us to, use that money. And we thought how best to use it. And we thought, why not Sophie's? A wonderful idea to make a film about fundamentally what we're all interested in, which is acting. And so we chose this small company of young actors, some of whom we worked with before, and had this idea, really, of working on Macbeth with 4 couples. And it was Sophie's idea to find this amazing place. It's called Twyford Abbey. It's in the west of London. It's almost in London, but it's quite it's about to be redeveloped into luxury flats, of course. But in that moment, just before, we caught it, and we were able to use it. And the space is wonderful for us, and it's amazing for Sophie's work.
Well, it's also it was also because when Declan and Nick first contacted me, we had a Zoom pretty much like this, and all of the things that had excited me about how they work immediately came back. Like, it's like when you haven't seen someone for a long time and then you see them again and then you're in that same place. So I knew that the space and the question of the space was essential. And then I said, well, where would we do this? And then it was Nick who said, really we should be in a real space. And I'd never been to Twyford Abbey before, but I'd heard about it. So when we arrived there, we were just, excited because it had so much potential. And then, Declan and Nick had ideas about making the actors and audiences to each other, that they would go off and find spaces that they could work with, and work on scenes. And so it was very much an organic process from my point of view. Being very agile as a documentary filmmaker, you have to be very alert, and you just have to sort of be seeing what's happening in front of you and keep seeing and seeing again, which is actually very similar to how the actor, the creative work of the imaginative work of the actor, actually lines up with the same kind of, as it were, discipline.
I mean, the space is incredible. It's its whole own character. It makes what could be just being a fly on the wall in this class, it's a micro version of the play. It really elevates it. But I'm curious. So you were talking about how you needed to use the space to capture this. You are filming it and you're directing it, and you're kind of there alone. But I'm wondering how Declan was able to convince these young performers that this was going to be unobtrusive and okay. What is that covenant between your camera in their faces and the kids? Declan?
Yes, there's a history to that. We did try it about 25 years ago, I think, when we were doing Othello, and Sophie came to some rehearsals, but we had to stop them after a bit because we just felt self-conscious, and and I started we all started acting in front of the camera. And then that was sort of sad, and we let that go. So we were doing Othello. And then time went on, and then COVID came, and then I just felt more confident, and we knew Sophie even better by that stage. And we said, well, let's try it. How about it? And that's what we did. I think it helped that the actors in the film aren't doing a production of Macbeth. They've been chosen to be in the film. And English actors, get very anxious about, first nights and so on and so forth. And that wasn't a pressure on them. So the actors were very much interested in learning about acting, I think, as opposed to just getting a smart performance on for the first night somewhere. So that did help. But I have to say, even at the risk of making Sophie blush, I really did forget Sophie was there in the nicest possible way, Sophie. It was quite difficult because, of course, she looked actually like a huge space woman from another planet with huge...
I had an easy read.
The
camera attached to me. That's why I look like a strange...
Well, it's interesting that we didn't manage to ignore her in the room. And I think that does come out in the movie, that we feel very unself-conscious with her. And it was good, but in the 20 years interim, we've seen each other a lot socially and so on.
But I also feel that from my point of view, that I felt like all the actors were so excited to be there and to have this opportunity to work with Declan and Nick. So they know that I have the same I have the same desire to be there, to learn, to see, to experience what they're doing, and I'm having conversations with them about what they're doing. So I'm like another person in the room. I'm not a camera. I'm me, and I have a camera. And so that, making it feel free is very important to me, and making people feel that I'm seeing and listening and present, and not, a person that's not as tuned into what's happening in every moment as they are with Declan and Nick.
That's really interesting. The idea that the shared awe of the process made you a part of them and not obtrusive to that. And that's one of the things that was so striking to me about the final version of the film, which is that we get this kind of the culture of these people. I mean, acting is one of the few things that you can't do alone. It's, it's not painters and writers. You need the other people. And that fosters a very unique culture among actors of any ilk, but especially theater actors. And that I was able to feel that in the scenes where they're just hanging out or listening to the notes, that I'm able to feel that without that being at all the point of the movie really struck me and took me back to all of my theater work as a little activating. And the ability to capture that, I was struck by, and I wanted to ask how intentional that may have been. Did you realize that you were going to end up with a sense of these people and their interactions beyond just the process when you went into this?
One of the things that I feel when I go into the process, I never try to have too many ideas about what it's got to be, but I need to be open to what it is. And that comes to this thing about seeing what's in front of me and then trying to catch it. And then, of course, it's over a year editing to shape it and to find those different, as it were, temperatures between the tension within the drama itself, the processes of learning. Because learning itself can be a fraught thing. It's where you're on the edge of what you don't understand or what you fear. So seeing these actors being able to respond to what Declan is saying and then seeing what they do with it was sort of like magic in a way. And I could only really appreciate that in the safety of the editing, because I wasn't having to think about where am I going to move. And I'm making those decisions very intuitively, but I'm thinking in a sense of like blocking with a camera too, so that I can reconstruct the space. Because of course, cinema and filmmaking is also very connected to space and cinematic space. So in that sense, there are different stages to this, and the points where they're relaxing and at those points of physical relaxation outside, the different kind of temperatures of the different material is important for a film, because films work through contrast. So being able to shape and make that relationship between when Declan is talking about the characters and what might be happening, and then when they're actually running the scenes, those are two different kind of temperatures in filmmaking terms. So that was really discovering that. And the editing was really thrilling. You know, it was really wonderful to kind of see what it could become in its leap from, you know, reality into a film.
And there are all of those wonderful moments towards the end of the film where you begin to shoot and edit it more and more like a narrative film.
Yeah.
Which is, and was that something you discovered in the editing, or later on in the sessions did you think, oh, well, now we need to do the movie?
Well, quite quickly I realized, because of the play, that, you know, if you say Act 2, Scene 2, you're going to go, what's happening? And so this question of the stakes or the predicament that is talked about, I didn't want the audience to have to think, or I didn't want to put on a screen or have to summarize. So it was very clear to me about 2 or 3 days in, because we shot over 11 days, that the film should be structured according to the play. And then as the evolution of the film works, you know, you see longer sections. So the drama is also like, you know, starting to, you know, emerge through the film, the actual dramatic stakes of Macbeth as a contained narrative.
This could be the kind of film that is revealing of the actors. We can see the actors move through their process and learn their characters and become more confident. But there's this whole other level to it that you have, which is watching Declan and Nick work with them, not just as leaders, but there's so many moments where Declan will like throw out an idea and be like, maybe that's dumb. I don't know. And the vulnerability in the moderation was really, really drew me in. And I'm curious for the two of you, Declan and Nick, if there were any points either in those 11 days that made it in the film or not, moments that you really felt like, oh, this way of thinking of the scene really landed with that couple, or that really didn't land. What moments really made you feel like, or Sophie, for you in the final cut of the film, when you were putting it together, could you really see, oh, now the kids get it? That unlocked something, you know?
Well, Declan, I don't know whether you want to answer that first, or...
So I know I'm so sorry. You're having technical problems here in northern France. It's probably the eclipse of the sun we're having, but you're coming and going a bit for me. But I think thank you for saying that, and it's very important for a director to understand what we're doing is that we also are vulnerable too, and that we're also learning. And to pick up on what Sophie was saying, yeah, learning is fraught. It's learning. If you're completely comfortable, you're probably not learning anything. And if you're completely comfortable, you're probably not teaching anything. See what I mean? Because it comes from the relationship between the two. And that's what's really important for us, is at the heart of our work. Rather than thinking that human beings are creatures that have relationships with each other, it's more useful for us to think that it's the relationships that make us human beings, that actually it's the encounter that comes first. It's a big thing, but I think it comes out, I hope it comes out in the film, that that's basically the center of what we're doing. So the whole thing, it's not about the actors or about the director and the actors, or the writer and the director and the actors. It's all about the spaces between. It's the spaces between that really matter. And the spaces between people, of course, takes place in the space. And that's what Sophie's been picking up. But that's really, really important, rather than getting confused by looking at things. Things are people or characters or God knows what. But it's actually what happens in the space between. That's the only place that life can happen, we think.
Yes, I mean, when you talk about how to put it together, I structured it really carefully to ensure that all of these insights that Declan and Nick bring, that they're constantly emerging as much as the narrative of the play. So there are some very important key points about this distribution, which is within the space, and the questions of thresholds and the passing of time in which everything is changing, that thought is changing. So this is the fundamental, frightening, exciting challenge to the actor, is to see what the character sees. and be surprised by that. So, and not act a plan, and not say this plan makes me feel safe. So that as a non-actor, I'm sort of fascinated and in awe of actors and how and this imagination, as much as there's the discipline of the breathing and the question of the Shakespearean text and the syllables and all of this, but it's also this point of imagination, that the actor's imagination has to sort of become activated. And I think that's one of the things that Declan's nourishments to the actor's imagination, and sort of opening up potentials. They're not fixed, but they are responses to the differences in the particular nature of those actors.
I'm wondering now what the relationship between this particular 11-day work was and your books, Declan. How much of that were you able, that theory were you able to bring or see in this particular round of the work? I'll also accept Sophie's answer if we're a little frozen, because you've been working with them. Or
well, as I say, I actually had a sort of, often there were certain familiar themes that Declan would bring to the actor to help them. So I became fascinated by how does he see, and how is he seeing what they're doing, and what will he say, and that becomes more and more sort of surprising, and but there are certain key structures to how they work. So I, in the edit, would find, well, where is the best example of the thresholds? Where is the best example of the distribution? So as much as I was structuring the film according to Macbeth and the extraordinary, the tragedy of Macbeth and the extraordinary language of Shakespeare, I was also really trying to ensure that it would be packing in incrementally all these different facets to their method. And so that's a lot of how, I was structuring it, from the work in the books, from the actor in the target, but more so the actor in the space.
I'm interested to hear that was so conscious for you, because those were definitely some of the moments that drew me the most. And again, maybe because it's the kind of thing that we, I don't know, see the least, or you've seen an acting class in a movie before. You had a drama club in middle school at some point, but the work underneath that work is something that I feel like think about so rarely.
Yeah.
And I was also interested in, because there were so many moments where we're looking at that in the film, then the relationship between Declan and Nick kind of takes a back seat and is very ready with the answer when you need it. And I became very curious about how they built that relationship over time, the sort of egolessness of that, and the two of them as a unit. So Declan and Nick, if you can hear me right now, I'm curious, was that always the case? Cheek by Jowl was you guys from the beginning, right?
Yes. We started Cheek by Jowl in 1981. And met Sophie therefore 5 years after we started, 1986, I think.
Yeah.
How has your working
relationship... that ages us.
No, it doesn't, because we're all incredibly young still.
That comes across in the movie, honestly.
Because if we seem a bit odd and aloof, what comes across? If we seem odd and aloof, it's because the camera's going, losing contact with you all the time. So we're sitting a bit like that. Anyway.
But did you get the question from Taylor?
Strangely, where we're speaking from. No.
I was
questions.
I was asking how the relationship between the two of you as the co-directors of this company has evolved over time, because in the film it feels very like Declan it takes the lead, and then Nick is there to catch whatever is falling through the cracks or see something that needs to be seen. There's a great delineation of
Well, I don't, yes, I mean, I'm not a director as such. When we work together, I don't ever talk to the actors. So it's kind of a slightly artificial situation, the film. And in fact, I don't think I ever talked to the actors individually. I never gave them notes when we were working. I might have had the odd idea in terms of mainly to do with the space that they're working in. No, the director is definitely Declan, and I'm kind of
Well, I'm the guy who talks to the
the
actors,
sidekick.
but the person who decides the whole staging is in fact Nick. But we don't talk about it. Do you know? We're quite strange because we do live together. You know, we do sort of share. We have shared a bed for 45 years. 55 years. So we don't actually have conversations anymore. We just go into a room and do it. So I'm the guy. I'm Irish and I talk a lot. And I'm the person who talks to the actors more. And Nick is the person who stages it really and says they come in from here and they do that and so on. And that's how that happens. That's the way it happens between us. And then we do talk generally, but we don't have big intellectual conflabs. I think it's I think the really important thing. Is it right for me to talk? Yes, just go on if you can still hear me. But I think when you're rehearsing something like the Shakespeare play, it's incredibly important not to be a visionary. I don't think visionaries are very useful in life, and I think it's much better to be a firefighter. The visionary depends on morality, but the firefighter depends on decency, and that's the guy I want to be looking after me when things get tough, or the woman looking after me when things get tough. I think rehearsal's quite similar in a way that you have to look after the small moments, and then, funnily enough, the big moments will look after themselves. It's like the murmuration of starlings, that you look at these amazing symphonies in the sky that look like they were staged by Hal Prince, or these incredible epic configurations of birds, and you think, oh my God, who's leading that? Who could possibly be in control of such a spectacular thing? And in fact, it's just the individual birds communicating with the two or three that are closest to them. And put together, it looks as if there's some extraordinary controlling influence. And very few people can believe that the murmuration, these massive things, results from this granular obsession with the small individual moment. And that's how I rehearse through a play. And I do it with Nick. We just do it in a granular way. But we don't have these big visions. And I'm suspicious in general in life of big visions, actually. I much prefer the moment to moment thing. And what's interesting is that the vision tends to look after itself. But I've noticed if you look after the vision, the details don't look after themselves. That's what I've noticed in my life. But it's only one life I've had.
That's a fantastic answer. I'm wondering, now that the company has existed for so long, and there have been the plays and there have been the books and there have been all of these different eras of the work for you. Are there things that you look back on maybe in the first of the books that you feel like you would add to or subtract from, that maybe you feel is less true or more true now than it used to be? Or is the theater...
Not really. I think everything develops, actually. After I wrote The Actor and the Target, I was always talking about target and rehearsal. And then after I published it in 2000, I never used the word target again. I just got so embarrassed because I could see people holding the... Yes, but what's interesting, I'm writing books 3 and possibly 4 at the moment, amazingly, but it's all very amorphous. And what was there from the beginning, even before The Actor and the Target, and I don't actually know where it comes from.
Okay.
It doesn't come from me. To you, that it all comes. Everything comes from the relationship. Nothing is generated from within. Nothing is created ab nihilo.
But you're breaking up, Declan. It's very frustrating.
Every relation. That's how it works, I think.
Oh, okay. I think I might have been getting more of you than Sophie was. So I didn't realize that the three of you had known each other for like almost the lifespan of Cheek by Jowl. Sophie, did you ever consider doing some acting? Did that ever?
You know what? I have to be really honest here. I realized as a woman, as a young girl, that if you were an actor or an actress, you would generally have to take your clothes off, and you would always get the less meaty parts.
Yeah, that's lucky you realized that early, I guess.
I was like, well, and I'd like to play, I'd like to play some of the male parts. I didn't. I'm generally quite shy, and I like to, I feel free, in what I do, and I'm not naturally an actor. I think it's a very particular kind of calling, even, that, and you have to have. There are certain sort of psychological predispositions that make that something that you are able to do, and it's not for me. I have too much doubt in myself. I think that's why I make films that are about learning. I mean, I think if this is a film, it's a learning film, but also we see a brilliant teaching, and I think that's also a value for the film, is to see how Declan teaches, and that's something that I'm thinking that's extraordinary that I met them when they really quite recently started the company, because I feel like they have sort of deep knowledge from the depths of time somehow. But of course, as Declan says, it's all born about by doing and by noticing, and the small process of noticing and taking care of that incrementally. And then you suddenly look back and you say, wow, there's this experience that I've gathered, and I'm still gathering. And so the film really represents just a point in their working life as theatre makers. And what I will say as a filmmaker is that, I'm kind of curious about, when you look back at the history of 20th century cinema and you think of Bergman and you think of, even Italian neorealism, you can see that those performances, and of course, people like Brando were fundamentally theatre actors. So I think that theatre is, the foundation of acting, and as Declan, I've heard him say, theatre is the actor's art, and so I feel that cinema can still learn so much from theatre, and the kind of imagination of the actor, and not being stuck in very tight ways of working with actors that are to do with where cameras are, to do with scripts, there was a sort of freedom of experimentation in this workshop, because there wasn't an end product in that sense of a production, and I think that allowed for experimentation and discovery that I feel is useful to hold on to beyond a workshop, but actually as a sort of way of thinking about how we approach making anything, really, because people who don't make theatre or even film also get a lot from listening and watching and seeing how this work is being made.
Your point about the first half of the 20th century, that cinema being so influenced by the theater, is pretty striking. I mean, it's so easy to forget today that that was a period where it was crazy that you could go to a movie theater and have like a macro cultural concept of acting. Humphrey Bogart didn't necessarily grow up having seen actors. Most people didn't go to the theater. And only in the last 70 years or so do we have a sense of everybody has a concept of what acting is, in a way that was never true for the rest of history. And what did that give us something, or have we lost something with the creation of a singular idea of what an actor is, as opposed to when you used to have to, be near a city or have a tour come through. Now everybody has a sense of what an actor is, and none of it is exactly what we meant originally. Does So that's kind of a scary concept. Have we lost something there? The actors in this, though, how did you put the pairings together? They're really interesting duos.
That was Declan and Nick.
Did you?
Are they there?
Do we have them? I'm not.
Well, they had a casting director, and that was something that they really love to work with younger actors. That's one of the things that's worth mentioning here, is that there are many actors who we now think of as, really significant actors, who all in their earliest careers worked with Declan and Nick. So I think they love that, in a sense, that freedom when you haven't, the danger of experience is that you can become kind of calcified in and build systems that protect you, whereas the younger actors are discovering and exploring and have a sort of sense of freedom that it was something that I think like Dave Burnett, he he said to me, am I going to look really terrible in this? Is this going to be me looking like doing really bad acting? And we had a laugh about it. And I said, well, I don't know, but that was something that they were ready to experiment with themselves and take that risk. And I think that's probably always worth doing. Like, even if you do look at those actors like Humphrey Bogart, they're playing with their performance, they're taking risks, they have a sense of possession of it, possession of their decisions. And then and usually a good director will just be thrilled. I mean, going back to when I was working with Peter Greenaway, he worked with Gambon, with John Gielgud, Helen Mirren, Alan Howard, Michel Piccoli, Erland Josephson, so many of these actors who were very confident, and he wasn't able, he didn't direct them, but they had real fun with what they did with his material. And that's always a wonderful thing to see, that kind of sense of the actor taking, exploring it, and then someone like Declan is able to work to, I think, even, like, as I say, people who have worked with Declan, like my brother Rafe, will still want to touch base with that thinking, to feel free, to feel free, where there's a director that's opening you up to thinking about things and seeing what you're doing. It's almost like a good parent that sees the child and helps them.
Speaking of parents, and Declan and Nick were talking about how they've been together so long that they don't have conversations. This just is in the house. Was yours a very artsy household growing up?
Well, we never had the funds to go to the theatre, but but my mother did passionately care about language and about, I think, the sort of possibilities of the creative life, or what David Lynch would call the art life. We definitely were schooled in a kind of version of the art life, and that's kind of like a kind of mother's milk, I think. Born and this is the thing, as a parent, a friend of mine said to me, they do what you do and not what you say. So as you always are modeling. So I think,
I guess that worked out for your mother's children, it seems. The art life stuck for you guys. Were you able? I know that most of your work is nonfiction, but I'm curious about the film director watching a theater director dynamic.
Yeah.
Did that feel like a sibling or a cousin, or do they feel
I first approached Declan and Nick to make this, to just sit in and watch them work, because I read The Actor and the Target, and I said, can I watch you working? And then when I saw them working, I had the idea about the film. But I was in there because I wanted to look at, and I had received a fellowship from an organization in the UK called Nesta. And what I wanted to do was to look at the relationship between fiction and the fictional, and and reality, what we call reality. So I felt that that was something that the actor is working between, and I think you see that even in the final film, 20 whatever years later, is that there is a kind of fascination with when they're not acting, but they're listening to instruction. It's just as active as when they're actually acting. And so that relationship, or that kind of slippage between performativity or performance or inhabiting another character and then listening, and those two, moving between those, was definitely a filmic excitement. And Robert Bresson's notes on the cinematographer, which is a essential read for anyone who wants to make theatre or film, as a maker or as an actor being in it. What he talks about models and that kind of Bressonian observation, where you're working with non-actors, but all kinds of extraordinary things are happening when you film people, and that sort of that relationship between a cinema that is not pre-planned with a kind of script and workshop within an inch of its life, but the discovery that happens when you put a camera on people and all these extraordinary kind of pulses which feel immediately fictional. As soon as you bring a camera into a space and start filming people, it's something else. It's a sort of a metamorphosis into something that is between, non-fiction and fiction for me. But I definitely carry, the anxiety of not understanding how actors work. What is acting? How do you direct actors? If you're a film actor, you never get this relationship with the director that you see in the film. Even when I showed the film in New York and met with lots of very seasoned actors, and they all were saying, oh my God, if only we could have this kind of workshop time, if only we could experiment and explore. So this is that acting, the film is a sort of utopia of what the acting process might be, can be, sort of should be. And I hope that that's what's useful for it, that it's like it's full of Declan's insights, and you're seeing him and his sense of humor. I'm really sorry that he's frozen and that we can't get a good enough connection, but he's also got a brilliant sensibility that's very funny as well, and I try to bring that out in the film. So yeah, I hope that the film is a sort of a useful tool, and it's also a documentation. And I maybe one day I will make fiction, and I think that this is a great learning process for me, because when you live with material like that for a year editing, you that's like a really rich experience.
We were just longing for your wit, Declan.
We're back.
Sophie was just talking about how much you had worked to get a sense of your cleverness and wit to come out in the film. So be funny if you can.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I was.
Sophie was saying nice things about.
Sophie was saying nice things. Get her to say them again.
Well,
So I didn't hear them.
She was saying how witty and funny you are, and
how
I'm joking. English irony.
And how when she was showing the film in New York, so many of our New York actors were saying, I wish that the process could be like this. I wish we had this much time. I wish I could have a chance to build that sort of rapport with a director, and the sort of utopian elements that were coming through in your work at the Abbey. So.
Sure, but I think it's quite a good idea to talk about utopia. That it's the whole thing has been prostituted to money, and money means you have to go fast. It's as simple as that. So it's a sort of battle with the dosh. It's a battle with cash. It's nothing more. But you do need time. But you need time to get to know people, because the play has to come out of relationships. Shakespeare's dead. They're just black signals on a piece of white paper. The only reason it's useful, which is fantastically useful, is because it enables us to be together. That's its only use. Otherwise, it's like dead hair on the barber's floor. So that's what really matters. And there's nothing magical about the process. It's just being human together. It's incredibly simple. It's about being human together, and then suddenly the murmuration happens, and these extraordinary things happen. It's only about having ordinary human contact. But no, I would love that, and I just think it's kind of very hard that acting has become a business, and I think it always was to a certain degree. But there are other cultures in which it's less a business. When there are permanent companies in Eastern Europe, for example, still, where it's people are less frightened about monetizing, is the word, isn't it? That you have to have well, this is all blah blah. You don't need to hear this from me. But no, I'd love to work with American. I'd love all that. I particularly like working with people when I know them well, though. I find it really kind of rather horrible walking into a room full of strangers and choosing strangers is so weird. Unchoosing strangers is even more horrible. And so I like to work with the same group, with more or less the same group over and over again, because then it's just better, because we have attachments to each other, because we understand each other's sense of humor, we understand all sorts of things about each other. It's only human. And that's what matters to both of us very much. The reason we started Shoot My Eye was that we met and didn't want to be separated, and we just knew we wanted to do something together. And we loved the theatre. We decided to do theatre together. But it's entirely the gravity in it was to have something to do together. It's as simple as that, and it hasn't really changed that much. And then there are groups of people and people you want to be with, and so on. That's incredibly important to us. Well, incredibly important. It's the centre of our lives. So that's where it starts from. It doesn't start from an idea. It doesn't start from thinking about things. It just starts from looking and having and responding to a need. That's what we do in rehearsals. You respond to a need in the space, a need that comes from people. And it doesn't come with me feeling I have to say something. I don't know. It's boring.
I want to start bringing some questions in, but I also had wanted to ask.
Does that sound very...
Yeah, no. But I also wanted, Declan and Nick, you guys had cut out right when I was curious about how you put the pairs of actors together. I know that you'd had a casting director.
Completely randomly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but we don't talk about it that much. We do it on hunches. We work on hunches. We don't sit down with a long piece of paper and come up with a sort of set of reasons, and what isn't that?
Well, no, we found the best young actors that we could,
and
in terms of the project, and then I think the coupling up was completely random. I think, if I remember rightly.
Well, sort of, yeah. But also, part of that is choosing a group of people you want to be with for 11 days. That's
one thing we've done a lot of, is choosing a group of people, and you do that instinctively. And I think you just think, oh, they'd be great, or whatever.
That'd be good. Yeah, they have some depth, and they've got some things that you look for naturally in people when you make friends. But it's very much to do with that human contact and people with whom you feel you can have human contact. They're not, and nothing is something that you can tick off on a checklist. That you can't have what they call now
in Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Do you know what I mean? We were casting young actors who we thought were good and we wanted to work with.
It seemed open and up for a challenge. And
I like this idea of art as who you want to hang out with. That's I get that. One of our questions is
yes, but whoever said it was anything else? I'm sorry.
No.
Can you deal with the profanity? Who the fuck said it? It's only about making a connection with people. Well, whoever. No, but I guess it's really central. We've got mad thinking it might be about something else.
And I think the film is a really good reminder of that, because I found myself.
I make a piece of art. I bring my caca to Mama. I say, Mama, look at this. And you want a connection with people. That's all we're doing. We're doing things that will hopefully help us to connect. And anything else is actually nonsense.
My circle and I have a saying about, if we're kind of like this.
Happening here is we're in a total eclipse of the sun here, and it's all gone completely dark outside because the moon has completely covered the sun. It's incredibly strange. Anyway, so that's what's happening here.
My friends and I have a saying about, we're always on the lookout for people who just want to make art and be friends. So I feel like this is the idea. One of the questions is about, did any of you, a big bit of Shakespearean theater recently in New York was when Glenda Jackson did King Lear kind of recently. Did that performance make it to any of you?
Yeah, exactly. But I think.
Okay. We're a little starved for our Shakespeare here. It's interesting that you are that you were talking about. Oh, of course I would be interested in working with American actors, and Sophie earlier the actress problem. I'm working on a thing right now that, kind of about female stars in the mid-century, and one of them always has this refrain that is essentially like, I wish I had been allowed to age like an English actress, where you can be cast for your 20-year-old self and your 50-year-old self and your 70-year-old self, and there's a pipeline to some degree. And I think that a lot of the American female actors that I know do have this sort of utopian sense of, the casting for BBC Two. Which may or may not be accurate, but definitely is something that I think we feel when we look at how your theater companies and film casts are able to continue on, and how there are roles written for people that are in just a slightly wider point of view than what so much of our media allows for. And so it's interesting that you were saying that the young cast of this film brought so much openness to it. I wonder if having less of a sense of the ticking clock of their actor age might help with that.
Heard the last 3 words.
Let's see. I think we're going to get another question in, but also, Sophie, I am curious.
It doesn't. It takes place between the actor and the space between the actor.
Obviously, your brother is primarily known for his performances, but his directing work, is striking. I've seen a number of his films, and I'm curious. There's something interesting about you being a devoted documentarian. My mother's a documentarian, so that's its own thing. And your brother's films not only being narrative, but like he's doing Shakespeare adaptations. These things are very heightened worlds. Was there ever a conversation about what you two were drawn to directorially that is similar?
Well, I did work with him. I did make a film of the 4 quartets that he directed and performed. Again, that was a pandemic thing, and it was great to work with him, and to make a documentation of that. I mean, someone said to me the other day, does it help you to have, Rafe as your brother? And I immediately said, well, yes, because I've had these extraordinary conversations with him over the full, and in fact, he was really excited that I was making this film of Declan and Nick, because he's huge, admirer of how they think about acting, and that was, that we're in a dialogue all the time, and I don't think there's hardly any film where he's not like, we're not having conversations about how those directors work, those scripts, what those choices are. So I feel very lucky to have had this kind of dialogue with Rafe over the course of his career. And even before, going right back to when he was at RADA and sitting at the kitchen table doing voice exercises and please, can you do that in your room? It is a kind of hanging out, and it is about kind of a community, and of course family is that on a good day. It's a creative community, like you with your mother, probably sharing kind of questions, thoughts, and that's the same for me. And I think Rafe's also a very good writer.
Yeah.
Are you back, Declan? Are you back with us?
He's muted.
But yes, I do feel that. You're muted.
Well, at least we know it's the eclipse, that is adding to it.
It's the eclipse. Thinking about the relationship between what I do and fiction, I realized in making this film that they were much, much closer. What I was saying about the observation and the imagination of the actor and the looking is much closer maybe than a director who's making, like Christopher Nolan, a huge, big, massive, epic piece of movie by today's standards. That's quite different, I feel, to actually how an actor works is more similar to how a documentarian works in terms of experimenting, exploring, having certain disciplines, and trying to understand something and trying to play with something.
That's a compelling comparison. I've never thought about that similarity, but you're really right about that, especially the way that documentary making can be solo, the way that acting can be solo, and that it is, but you don't necessarily, doesn't look like it is.
Yeah, and I also think that in terms of when I went into that rehearsal space, the fragility, the vulnerability of it is not dissimilar to the editing space, because that's a very vulnerable place, because you're trying to make something, and if someone walks in and goes, "What? I don't understand," or or, "Oh, I got," or people have very strong reactions, and you're going, "No, this is the editing room also has to be a very protected space."
Yeah,
similar to the rehearsal room.
I've also been in a sound mix all week, Sophie, and that has been very much on my mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. I feel like we're just about at the end of the time they've given us, but I did want to just ask, towards the end of the film, when it starts, well, I guess maybe it's a throughout the film question. We talked about you having the rig and trying to be unobtrusive. Are you usually shooting your films?
The documentary stuff, I generally do shoot my own stuff, and this, this is something that could only be shot by me, because and it was, the cameras now are extraordinary. I mean, this was a Panasonic S1H. It's a quite heavy camera, small camera, but heavy, and so having the rig and being able to move fluidly within it was great. And also, frankly, the AI for being able to have a touch screen to change focus without, you've got this extraordinary new technology that changes what's possible, and also multi-mic. So we had multi-mic on everybody, and then someone who's mixing and recording everything. So I had in the edit pristine separate sources for each actor, and that was what gave me the idea about the multiple layerings, because it's fun, this multiple Macbeths, multiple couples. And I did think at a certain point it was a bit like couples therapy with the Macbeths, in the sense that, oh, you're back.
We're back. Hello.
Hello.
We've been here all the time, just looking at a blank screen.
Oh.
So it's been total eclipse from New York as well. So there you go.
Well, I was saying that we're let's see, things that Sophie was sort of able to answer on your behalf. I guess despite your freezing, we actually got a lot of your answers, or at least it came through my side, which I think is the side they're recording. But one thing I do want to ask is, how much of this cast had you worked with before? Because there was a casting director and they were people you wanted to hang out with, but were there any repeat performers? Or was this discovery for you guys for this whole cast? Had you worked with anybody in this cast before?
So I didn't hear that, Taylor.
Had you worked with anybody in this cast before?
Yes.
Yes. We worked with
Orlando
many times. Grace.
Yeah.
Who else? Jonathan was in Tis Pity.
Okay.
Yeah. And did we work with David before? No.
Okay.
Yes, we have worked with a few of them before. Yes, but actually, there was a really good feeling in the group. It was like people really wanted to do it, and it wasn't at all. It was really nice working with them.
And that's great then, because then I imagine you've discovered this whole new group of young people that might come through again. Okay. Let's see. Is there anything?
I'm sorry, Charlie. You'll have to say that again.
But I imagine that's nice that
you were blanked out.
that most of them are new collaborators.
What you said, Taylor. If you ask me,
it must be nice that most of them are new collaborators.
I'm not hearing, I'm afraid.
Oh, don't
we
worry
can
about
imagine what you said. I can become like AI and make it. But I don't know what you said. I don't know how to answer. Are you saying, Mike, we go and have relationships with them and work with them again? I hope so. They're great, some of them.
Is there anything?
We get fed up working in a world where the group of actors keeps changing all the time. And it just changes all the time in the English-speaking world. And if we can keep a group of actors together, like we can in Spain and Romania and Bulgaria, we keep the actors together. We just are much happier with that. And that's what we're doing in Russia for all those years. We were working in group actors. We just love it. They would change slightly. There'd be people come and go, but there was a proper core going through that. It was really good. Well, the idea of a whole room full of strangers at the beginning of a rehearsal period for a major Shakespeare play. Oh God, seems almost indecent to be doing such an intimate thing with people you don't know.
You're right that is much more rarity in the English-speaking world, that we almost take as fact, but it doesn't have to be. So that's about all of the time that we have, but I did want to ask all three of you, but Sophie, if you're the most connected, is there anything that we didn't get to today that maybe you haven't gotten to talk about this film in the past that you'd like to take this chance to? A favorite scene that has never come up before, or anything like that, or a challenge that has never come up before? Or maybe we've got to it all.
Not really. I mean, when you live with a piece of work, as a filmmaker, as you know yourself, you're immersed in it and you live in it, and then when you move beyond it, any questions that come, you sort of reach back into that experience, and you're always surprised about what felt like, what mattered. It's not like it's not really like I've got fixed things that I need to talk about. The film exists, and it's as Declan says, they're a micro manage, caring, carrying, like he talked about the murmurations of the starlings. It's like that's the film, is the murmuration, as it were. And I'm happy to respond to any question. I saw there was a question.
Yeah. Essentially, this question is from a theater maker in Poland who's asking essentially about Michael Chekhov's theories, specifically about his views on atmosphere. And they're wondering, are Chekhov's views on atmosphere similar to Declan's views on space? But I think it's in.
No, I can hear you just.
Can you see the screen? Can you see the question, Declan?
This is about Michael Chekhov's theories.
While they're reading that, I will say that one of the things that Declan does introduce me to is this book called Improv, which is and a lot of those improv exercises. I think there are connections between that and Declan's work. Declan, can you hear us? I know the Michael Chekhov book, but I couldn't answer for Declan.
Well, actually, though, that actually raises a question that I'm wondering about, Sophie. We talked a bit about you're making a film in a theater space, but did these theater theorists, did that ever make its way to you? This is about Chekhov and Stanislavski. I mean, as a filmmaker with such a unique way of working, I'm curious, did you implement the theater thinkers into your like early cognition of your director self, or did you manage to avoid viewpoints and all of the theorists?
Well, I'm completely untrained in anything, and I just did I left school at 16, and I just did a foundation in art. So I'm a bit like fools rush in where angels fear to tread. You know,
Cool.
I'm very, you know, I've just learned by doing. So I do find it intriguing when I come up. I mean, film theory particularly. But hi, are you back? Can you hear us?
No, guess not.
So, I mean, I will say the other day I came across quite recently the work of Stanley Cavell on you know, about film. So it's like more image, less theatre, because I mean, that was why I wanted to make the film, because I read Declan's book. And then I was fascinated by the improv exercises in the book Improv, and I can't remember the name of the director who wrote that book.
That was
just yeah, you can Google it, because Declan was they're increasingly doing director workshops, like they like working with young directors, and that was where he referenced some of the status exercises in this book Improv, and it is really interesting. That's a very fascinating book.
Okay.
I feel like I'm just starting out in terms of acting theory, but I have a friend of mine who is a Russian theatre director, Irina Brown, and she gave me the Michael Chekhov book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I sometimes find myself coming back to the theater thinkers just to like reframe everything, because I mean the whole like dialectic of writing about theater is weirdly different than the way we write about film. It almost shouldn't be, but I think kind of to your point that it predates the cinema by so long. You know, if we've only had movies for 100 years, we've only had movie nerds for 90. You know. Yeah,
I mean, I'm thinking because, you know, like certain performances, like Anna Magnani in Rome Open City. I mean, she was a variety hall performer. There's a sort of essential embodied kind of physicality to acting in the theatre that you don't necessarily have in the same way. You're an image in film. You're turned into an image before. Well, in theatre, you're a body. I've worked a lot with dancers, and I've actually managed dance, and I learned a lot about thinking through working with a choreographer who just thought in such an interesting way. So in terms of the questions of if you're a dancer, how far do you push something before you fall over? You know, quite simple, but that's quite a good axiom for how to think creatively about making work on the edge. so that it has that kind of aliveness that Declan was talking about. I do find the writing by artists, when artists have written about their work or have been in dialogue, I've always find that very interesting, how the differences of how different people think about and approach their writing and what their work.
Yeah.
You know, artists like Agnes Martin, the painter, her writings are wonderful.
And it's your point about the base necessities of being a dancer. You don't knock the thing over. That's a striking image, and it makes me, the reverse makes me wonder about, as we have a new generation of actors coming of age that for the first time ever have been images before they were anything else. I mean, your mom taught you to be good on your Instagram before you were enrolled in ballet class. If you're 20 years old now, that's probably true for you.
Oh, exactly.
And the disconnect of that you've been an image before you've been a person?
Yeah.
I wonder.
Well, I think that, you know, in that one of the things, in fact, Rafe finds it really frustrating, is actors always being mic'd up in theatre as opposed to actually using their voice. And so that kind of stripping away of the physicality of the actor's work. And I mean, obviously there are some spaces which are very big and acoustically not very good to work in for the actor. But I do think that there is increasingly, certainly in London, lots of small, you know, theatre companies and spaces where people want to make theatre. There's something about making theatre that's kind of where things get stripped down, so it has a vitality in it, and it's more vulnerable, but it's all the more kind of surprising for that when it works. You know, and also you don't need. I mean, you do need money, but now as makers of anything, certainly in the UK, you know, you really are lucky to be able to make ends meet. It's so hard financially, so it has to be worth it. Oh, Sophie, it was Keith Johnson's book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's
a wonderful book. Keith Johnson's wonderful book.
Well, exactly, because I was saying,
when I was growing up, I must say. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
We can hear you. But I think
you still hear me, Nick? I don't know.
Yeah. That's as long as the stream is gonna go. But I did want to say that the film, and this actually is a little bit different than we normally do. The film is playing at the library next Wednesday, the 19th at 3 p.m. So if you want to see it in person with real people you want to hang out with, that's the way to do it. But also the actor in the target and Declan's writings are in the collection at the library, which I'm I guess a little bit used to this now, so because I've been doing this series with them for a while. But the Queen's Public Library apparently has the largest circulation of any library in America. It's the most diverse and the most like densest population. And so there will be things in their collection that I'm amazed are there. And then I realized, well, no, of course, if you have that many people, of course, 8% already asked for that and already read that book. So I hope that Wednesday's screening is a blast, even though we're doing this beforehand.
Can I suggest that the Queen's Public Library gets a copy of The Actor in the Space?
I think they have both.
Do they have both? Yeah.
I think they have both. Yeah. Okay, great. Well,
I'm sorry about the connection.
Oh, it's the total eclipse of the sun. What are you gonna do? And break a leg with the new film. You're opening. You start showing it in September. It starts the festival run. Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming, Declan and Nick. We did get more of you than you might realize. There were some moments where you
were feel slightly failed, as if it's somehow I don't know.
No, we got more of you than you realize, I think. We got more. We could hear you even if you were frozen. So the film plays next Wednesday at the library. But I hope people watch this before and after for some context. But thanks for coming in, guys.
Thank you, Taylor.
Okay. Enjoy your eclipse and your the rest of your summers. All right. Good. Bye.